The glare from my phone lit up the post my daughter-in-law had written, "Grandma has dementia," with a wink emoji. Still, I adjusted my glasses and sat a little straighter, like any grandmother would before church. As the screen's cold light hit the edge of my medical report, the silence in the room shifted. While her friends laughed in the comments, I opened the front camera and steadied my voice. The same woman who once called me mom had bet on shame keeping me quiet. That's when I went live and let the world read the truth off hospital letterhead. We're about to begin, but if you'd like, share where you're joining from. It reminds me this story doesn't echo into silence, it lands somewhere real. Drop it in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe. Evelyn woke to the persistent buzz of her phone, dozens of missed calls lighting up the screen. At first, she thought it was a mistake, maybe some sort of glitch, but as the list of names grew longer, her heart skipped a beat. Friends from church, old colleagues, even a few neighbors, all calling, all at once. Confused, she sat up in bed, squinting at the early morning light that filtered through her curtains. The clock read 7:14 a.m., too early for any kind of normal conversation. Something was wrong. She unlocked her phone, bracing herself. The first thing that caught her eye was a notification from Facebook. Amber's post. "Please pray for my mother-in-law. Early dementia is heartbreaking." The words struck her like a cold wind. Evelyn's breath caught, and for a moment, she couldn't move. The photo attached to the post showed her from last night. She recognized it immediately. She had been standing in the kitchen, half dazed after another sleepless night. Her hair a little messy, eyes tired, but nothing unusual. Nothing that screamed dementia. But Amber had made sure to capture it, without asking, without her consent. Her hands trembled, not because of age, but from disbelief. Dementia? That was absurd. She might have moments of forgetfulness, but this? No, not her. She wasn't losing her mind. Evelyn quickly scrolled through the post's comments. Prayers, well wishes, and pity flooded the screen. "So sorry, Evelyn," one friend wrote. "God bless you, dear," another added. It was as if the world was deciding her fate for her based on one photo, one post, one cruel assumption. A message from Ryan popped up on the screen. "Mom, it's just a misunderstanding." Evelyn felt the sting of his words. A misunderstanding? This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a public accusation. A lie. And Ryan thought it could be cleared up with a text? Before she could process that, the phone buzzed again. This time, it was Hannah. "Grandma," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "I didn't know she'd post that." Evelyn closed her eyes. "Of course you didn't, sweetie," she thought. "But it doesn't make it any easier." "Don't worry, darling," Evelyn replied softly, trying to steady her voice. "This is between me and Amber. I'll handle it." Her fingers clenched around the phone. She had to do something. She couldn't just let this slide. But what? What could she do now? Her heart was racing, but Evelyn forced herself to breathe slowly. She couldn't act on impulse. Not yet. But one thing was certain. Amber had made a terrible mistake. Evelyn stood up from the bed, the weight of the situation settling into her chest. The tremors in her hands hadn't stopped. But they weren't from age. They were from the feeling of her world shifting beneath her. She wasn't going to let this go. Not now. Not ever. Evelyn's hands trembled as she walked into the lobby of the hospital. The morning's shock still rattled her, the cruel post Amber had made, the flood of pitying comments, the disbelief in her son's voice. She couldn't stand it. It wasn't just the misunderstanding. It was the public nature of the accusation. Her dignity was being questioned. And that, Evelyn knew, was something she couldn't let slide. She approached the front desk, her mind already made up. She needed to see Dr. Samuel Green. She needed confirmation, something concrete, official, and she needed it fast. The receptionist greeted her with a bright smile, but Evelyn didn't return it. "I need an appointment with Dr. Green as soon as possible," she said firmly, her voice steady despite the storm inside her. The receptionist hesitated but nodded. "He's free in an hour. Would that work?" Evelyn's jaw tightened. "Yes, please." An hour later, She sat across from Dr. Green in his office, the sterile smell of antiseptic heavy in the air. The usual calm demeanor of the neurologist was absent today. His eyes flicked to her with concern as she placed a neatly organized file on his desk, filled with records, prescriptions, and test results she'd kept meticulously for years. "You've always been prepared, Evelyn," he said, flipping through the papers. "But what's all this for?" "I need you to run a full cognitive evaluation," Evelyn replied, her tone cool but with an edge of steel. "Amber posted that I have early dementia. I need proof that I don't." Dr. Green's brow furrowed. "Early dementia? That's absurd. You're sharper than most of my interns." Evelyn nodded but didn't allow herself to soften. She'd been waiting for someone to dismiss this as a misunderstanding. But it wasn't. She needed Dr. Green to understand the seriousness of it. "I need this on paper. Something official. I won't let her destroy my reputation based on a lie." The neurologist stared at her for a moment, clearly processing the weight of what she was asking. Finally, he sighed, his expression softening. "I'll run the full tests. We'll get you cleared." Evelyn's chest tightened with relief, but she knew it wasn't over yet. The tests were only the beginning. Amber had started a fire, and now Evelyn had to be ready to douse it with facts, with truth. When the appointment ended, Evelyn stepped outside into the bright Charleston morning, the sun too warm against her skin. She didn't feel warm, though. She felt the tension coil tighter inside her. But there was something else, a quiet determination. She pulled out her phone and dialed Claire Benton. The phone rang twice before Claire picked up. "Claire," Evelyn said quickly. "It's not slander if you can prove intent." Claire's voice came through the line, sharp as ever. "What happened?" "Amber posted about me, claiming I have early dementia. I need to fight back, and I need to do it now." "I'll start looking into it," Claire replied, her voice already calculating. "We'll build a case." Evelyn took a deep breath, walking toward her car. "Good. I'll get you everything you need." As she hung up, Evelyn's eyes narrowed with resolve. She had the evidence. She had the truth. And now, she was going to take this fight to Amber. The evening light filtered softly through the kitchen window, casting a warm glow on the countertop where Evelyn carefully arranged the ingredients for her pie. The rhythmic movements of her hands, kneading the dough, pressing it into the pan, felt grounding, like a momentary escape from the chaos. The quiet of the kitchen was a balm against the storm of emotions swirling in her mind. Her phone buzzed again on the counter. Ryan. She wiped her hands on the dish towel before glancing at the message. "Mom, Amber is making dinner. Please come. It'll calm things down." Evelyn stared at the text, her chest tight. Calm things down? After Amber's post about her supposed dementia, after the flood of pitying comments, how could a dinner be anything but an act? Amber had already cast her in the role of the weak, confused woman. She wasn't going to play along. Instead of replying, Evelyn returned to the pie, the soft scent of apples filling the air as she slid it into the oven. She didn't need Amber's validation. She didn't need to prove herself by showing up. Tonight, she would be still, quiet. Later, the phone buzzed again. A notification from Facebook. Evelyn hesitated only a moment before unlocking the screen. Amber's post appeared. It was a photo of the dinner table, beautifully set with a single empty chair where Evelyn would have sat. The caption read, "It's hard watching loved ones withdraw." The sting hit her like a slap. Withdraw? Evelyn had made the choice to stay home, to keep her dignity intact. But Amber had turned it into a narrative, a story where she was the martyr, where Evelyn was the one who'd turned her back. The comments flooded in. "You're so strong, Amber." Sending prayers. "Hope Evelyn comes around soon." Over 200 responses, each one pushing the same false narrative. Evelyn picked up her laptop, opened a new email, and attached a screenshot of Amber's post. The subject line read, "Character damage." She hit send to Claire, knowing this was the start of something bigger. Sitting back, she felt a quiet sense of resolve. The dinner wasn't necessary. But this fight? This fight was just beginning. The sterile air of Dr. Green's office felt familiar, but today it was suffocating. Evelyn sat across from him, her hands folded neatly in her lap, her mind racing. The silence between them stretched until Dr. Green finally placed the report in front of her, his expression unreadable. "I've gone through everything, Evelyn," he said quietly. "There's no evidence of cognitive decline. Your mental function is well within the normal range for your age." Relief flooded through her, but Evelyn kept her face steady. She'd known it, of course. The accusation was ridiculous. But hearing it from Dr. Green, someone whose opinion she respected, gave her the validation she needed. "Thank you," she replied, her voice calm but sharp. "I knew it." He paused, looking over the papers again before pushing a new form toward her. "I'm also signing an affidavit confirming your mental clarity. You'll have this in writing." Evelyn took the papers, her fingers brushing over the clean, official language. This wasn't just a report. It was her weapon. She would use it to expose the lie, to take back what Amber had tried to steal from her. "Good," Evelyn said, her voice hardening. "I want it clear. If this gets out, I want everyone to see the truth." Dr. Green raised an eyebrow. "I understand. It's a serious statement. I'll have it notarized." Evelyn smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Thank you, but I'll be sure to take care of it." Back home, Evelyn sat at her desk, the report open in front of her. She scanned every word, committing it to memory. Then, she saved it under a new name, Amber Proof, PDF. There was no turning back now. Her phone buzzed with a message from Claire. Evelyn tapped the screen, seeing her lawyer's name flash up. "I've gone through it, Evelyn." Claire's voice was sharp and confident, just as Evelyn expected. "This isn't revenge. It's a correction. It's clean. It's exact." Evelyn felt a flicker of relief. Claire understood. "Good," she replied. "That's exactly what I want. No drama, just the truth." Claire chuckled, a sound that felt oddly reassuring. "I'll start drafting your statement. We'll time it perfectly. The world needs to hear this from you, not anyone else." Evelyn leaned back in her chair, her fingers drumming lightly on the desk. The pieces were falling into place. She had the proof. She had the plan. But even as she began to draft the statement, a small knot of tension remained. Amber would strike back. Of that, Evelyn had no doubt. The attack had been public, and so would the response. It would be calm, controlled, calculated, and it would make sure that Amber's lie was exposed for what it was. With a final glance at the report, Evelyn clicked save again, feeling the weight of the next step settle over her. There would be no more whispers, no more accusations. The truth would stand tall, and the world would see it, no matter how Amber tried to twist it. The game had begun. The late afternoon sun bathed Evelyn's living room in a warm, golden light. She sat at her desk, her laptop open in front of her, the pages of Dr. Green's report still fresh in her mind. The quiet of the house was both a comfort and a weight, the silence stretching out before her as she gathered herself. She could feel the anticipation, a strange combination of fear and exhilaration pooling in her chest. It was time. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, unsure for just a moment, before she clicked the button to go live. The title flashed on the screen. "For those concerned about my health." Simple, direct, and precise. The camera clicked on. Evelyn adjusted it slightly, making sure it was positioned just right. She was dressed neatly but casually, her hair pulled back in a low bun, her posture composed. She looked every bit the image of the calm, dignified woman she was. No trace of the frailty Amber had tried to paint her with. Her fingers gripped the edges of Dr. Green's report, and she held it up to the camera so her viewers could see the official document, each line clearly legible. Verified, dated, signed. "I wanted to take a moment to address the rumors that have been circulating about my health," Evelyn began, her voice steady, clear. "Some of you may have seen the post by my daughter-in-law, Amber, claiming that I'm suffering from early dementia. I've received a great deal of sympathy and concern from friends, and while I appreciate that, I want to set the record straight." The comments began to flood in, fast and furious. "You look great, Mrs. Moore. So glad you're okay. We're praying for you." The messages were supportive, filled with warmth and kindness, the complete opposite of what Amber had sought to portray. Evelyn continued, her tone unshaken. I'm here to assure you that I'm perfectly fine. I've just had a full evaluation with my neurologist, Dr. Samuel Green, and I have the report to prove it. She paused for a moment, allowing the words to sink in before she read the key lines of the report aloud. There is no evidence of cognitive decline. I am in perfect health, mentally and physically. I'm sharp as ever. The comments continued to pour in, but they were different now. This is so reassuring. Glad to hear you're okay. Amber's post was way out of line. Evelyn's eyes never left the screen. Her fingers still clutching the edges of the paper, her face composed. She could feel the tide of support shifting toward her, the sympathy that had been misdirected toward Amber now flowing toward her. Then, something caught her eye. A new name appeared in the viewer's list. Amber. Evelyn's heartbeat quickened. Amber was watching. She could feel the heat of it, the tension, the expectation. She didn't let herself react, not yet. Instead, she calmly read one more line from the report. Thank you all for your unwarranted sympathy, but there's no need for it. I am well. Her voice was even, no hint of bitterness, just truth. She allowed the moment to hang in the air. And then, as if waiting for the inevitable, she typed a quick response to Ryan's text. Mom, what are you doing? It read. Evelyn paused before replying, her fingers moving across the screen with quiet purpose. Remembering perfectly. And just like that, it was done. She had made her statement. She had proven her point. The world would see the truth now. Amber's lie would be exposed for what it was, a desperate attempt to control a narrative that wasn't hers to write. The live stream continued for a few moments, Evelyn calmly answering questions, the tide of comments now overwhelmingly positive. But in the back of her mind, she knew Amber would not let this go quietly. Evelyn's hand trembled slightly as she ended the broadcast. The fight had just begun. But for the first time, Evelyn felt like she was in control. And she wasn't about to let anyone take that from her. The morning after Evelyn's live stream, a strange calm settled over the house. The storm that had raged in her mind for days seemed to have quieted, though the echoes of Amber's lies still reverberated through her thoughts. The phone had barely stopped buzzing with messages of support from friends and well-wishers. People who had been too quick to pity her now felt foolish. And Evelyn couldn't help but notice the shift. The tide was turning. But Amber? Evelyn knew that would come later. She poured herself a cup of coffee, watching the news scroll across the bottom of the screen. The viral nature of the live stream hadn't just made waves among friends and acquaintances. It was making ripples far beyond what she'd anticipated. As the world watched her calmly dismantle the lie, Amber's carefully constructed narrative was starting to unravel. Evelyn opened her laptop and, as expected, found Amber's post had been deleted. In its place was a new one. Misunderstanding cleared up. The comment section erupted. Initially, the reactions had been supportive, even sympathetic. But now, the mood had shifted. A few stray comments lingered, and then the floodgates opened. You don't fake dementia for likes. That wasn't a misunderstanding. You manipulated your family and friends. Amber, this is disgraceful. The words were sharp, cutting, and they sliced through Amber's calm facade. Evelyn could see it all unfolding before her. Each comment another nail in the coffin of Amber's credibility. She didn't need to respond. The damage was already done. Her phone buzzed again. This time, it was Ryan. Mom, I can explain. Can we talk? The text read. Evelyn stared at it, her fingers hovering over the keys. She didn't respond immediately. What was there to say? Ryan had chosen Amber's side, had dismissed the gravity of the situation, believing it could all be smoothed over with a few kind words. But Evelyn couldn't pretend that it didn't matter anymore. The betrayal was deeper than that. She deleted the message without replying. The quiet was interrupted by the sound of the front door opening. Evelyn turned to find Hannah standing in the doorway, her face shadowed with uncertainty. Her eyes were puffy, as though she'd been crying, though she didn't say anything. Hi, Grandma, Hannah whispered. Evelyn smiled, her heart swelling. Hey, sweetheart, how was school? Hannah paused for a moment before walking toward her grandmother. Not great, she said quietly, her voice trembling. People are talking. At school. Evelyn nodded, her stomach twisting. She had expected this. Children could be cruel, and rumors spread like wildfire. But seeing Hannah so affected, so caught in the crossfire of it all, stung in a way she hadn't anticipated. "I'm proud of you," Hannah said suddenly, her voice firm despite the sadness in her eyes. "You stood up for yourself. You showed everyone the truth." Evelyn felt her breath catch, a lump rising in her throat. "Thank you, darling," she said, her voice unsteady. "I just wish you didn't have to be caught up in all of this." Hannah shrugged. "I'm just glad you didn't let them win. You're strong." Evelyn reached out and pulled her into a tight hug. "I've learned a lot, sweetheart, and I'm not about to back down now." Later, Claire called, her voice calm and professional, just like always. "Evelyn," she said, her words clipped with purpose. "Silence is your headline now. Don't engage. Don't respond to Amber or anyone else. Let the narrative settle, and let the truth stand on its own." Evelyn took a deep breath, feeling a quiet sense of power. "I'm not going to say another word." "I know," Claire said with a smile in her voice. "And that's what's going to hurt Amber the most." As the day wore on, the reactions continued to pour in. Amber's followers were thinning, their once loyal comments now laced with doubt. Evelyn remained silent, letting the world decide. She didn't need to say another thing. The truth was already out there, and the internet had a way of remembering what others wanted to forget. But even as she sat back and allowed the moment to settle, Evelyn knew that the battle wasn't truly over. Amber would strike back. She always did. But Evelyn was prepared. This time, she was the one holding all the cards, and she wasn't about to let anyone take them from her. Evelyn sat in the green room, the cold lighting above making her feel more alert than usual. The echo of the quiet morning lingered, replaced now by the hum of television production people moving quickly, walking past in a blur of motions. She could feel the adrenaline surge through her, a sense of purpose that calmed the nerves she'd fought back for days. It wasn't the first time she'd been on television, but this felt different. She wasn't there to promote a book or discuss some forgotten charity event. No, this time, she was there to tell her story, to take the narrative back from the people who thought they could control it. She glanced at her phone, which buzzed with another message from Ryan. "You didn't have to do this, Mom. It's only making things worse." Evelyn let out a slow breath, her thumb hovering over the screen. She didn't need to answer him. She already knew what he thought, what he would never understand. The moment had passed for explanations. Her fingers finally typed a response. "No, I had to do this right." The door to the green room opened, and the assistant motioned for her to follow. "You're up in 2 minutes." Evelyn stood, her back straight, shoulders squared. She'd rehearsed this moment in her mind 100 times, but now it felt real as the storm that had gathered outside the studio, the kind that would tear through everything in its path. As she walked onto the set, the bright lights hit her, and for a second, she felt exposed. The host, a man with an easy smile and a practiced demeanor, stood to greet her. He shook her hand warmly, guiding her to the chair where she would sit for the interview. The audience clapped politely as she took her seat. "Thank you for joining us today, Mrs. Moore," the host said, his voice warm and inviting. "I'm sure many of our viewers have seen the viral video where you responded to the claims about your health. How are you feeling about the way things have unfolded?" Evelyn's lips curved into a small smile, and she met the host's eyes. "I feel that I did what needed to be done. Sometimes, silence is golden, but in this case, truth needed a voice." She glanced at the camera, and for a moment, it felt like she was speaking directly to Amber. Digital platforms have given people a voice, but they've also created an environment where truth can be easily manipulated. "I wanted to correct that." The host nodded, impressed with her composure. "And you certainly did. We've been showing clips from your live stream where you calmly read from your medical report, disproving the rumors. Can you walk us through that moment?" The screen behind them flickered to life, showing the footage of Evelyn on the live stream, holding up Dr. Green's report, her voice steady, the words clear. The audience watched in silence as the clip played, her calmness in the face of the accusation almost mesmerizing. When the clip ended, the audience applauded. Evelyn's smile didn't falter. She had expected the reaction. It was the same as she had gotten on social media. The tide was turning. The world was starting to see the truth. As the applause faded, the host turned back to her. "You handled it with such grace, Evelyn. A lot of people would have lashed out, but you didn't. What do you think is the key to handling something like this with dignity?" Evelyn paused, her gaze thoughtful. "I've learned that fighting fire with fire only creates more smoke. Sometimes, the best way to handle something is to stand in your truth and let others see it for themselves. You can't control what people think, but you can control how you respond." Meanwhile, back at home, Amber was watching the show. Her face flushed with a mixture of anger and embarrassment. She clutched her phone in her hands, watching Evelyn on the screen, her composure cutting through the airwaves like a scalpel. The comments flooded in on social media, many of them still echoing the sentiment that Amber had gone too far. The camera cut back to the studio as the host asked another question, but Evelyn could feel Amber's presence in her mind, like a shadow, a reminder that this battle wasn't over. Amber was still a threat, still out there. But for now, Evelyn had the upper hand. The host smiled warmly at her. "It's clear that you've become an inspiration to so many people. What's next for you, Mrs. Moore?" Evelyn's smile deepened, her eyes calm. "Next, I plan on helping others find the courage to speak their truth. No one should ever feel silenced, especially when their integrity is at stake." As the interview wrapped up and Evelyn stood to leave, she felt the weight of the moment settle in her chest. It wasn't just the live stream or the public statement. It was the understanding that the world would now see Amber's lies for what they were. But as Evelyn walked off the stage, she knew the storm was only just beginning. Amber wouldn't back down, and neither would she. And this time, Evelyn was ready. The morning after Evelyn's television appearance, the silence of her home felt different. It wasn't the usual peace she cherished, but the silence that settled after a storm had passed. The air felt charged, and as much as Evelyn tried to enjoy the quiet, she knew there was more coming. It wasn't over. Not yet. Claire called her mid-morning, her voice calm, as always, but there was something behind it, something Evelyn could read between the lines. "Evelyn, I've drafted a legal response to Amber's PR team," Claire said. "We've attached Dr. Green's report and the link to your viral stream. Defamation was public. So is the correction." Evelyn nodded to herself, knowing this was the only way to ensure Amber couldn't backpedal and rewrite the narrative. "Send it," she said, her voice steady, but a weight lingered in her chest. The decision had already been made. Amber wouldn't have the luxury of hiding behind half-hearted apologies or misstatements anymore. It wasn't long before Claire forwarded the final draft. Evelyn read through the letter slowly, savoring the sharpness of each word, the clarity of each point. She could practically hear Claire's strategic mind at work behind every sentence. "Dear Amber's PR team, this letter is in response to the baseless claims made regarding my client's mental health. The false accusations of dementia were made public through your client's post, and as such, the correction must also be public. Enclosed is the verified report from Dr. Samuel Green, neurologist, confirming my client's cognitive health and mental clarity." Evelyn stopped reading for a moment, her thoughts turning to Amber. She hadn't expected Amber to back down quietly, but she had hoped for something more than what she'd gotten. A public smear campaign followed by a hasty, defensive retraction. Evelyn felt no satisfaction in it. This wasn't about victory, not really. It was about dignity, her dignity, and Amber had tried to steal it. "In light of these facts, we demand a retraction and public apology from your client, posted across the same channels and platforms where the original false claims were made." The letter finished with an ultimatum. Amber had 48 hours to comply. If not, they would take further legal action. Evelyn sent it off with a deep breath. There. It was done. The lines were drawn. The next day, Amber's PR team retracted the letter, removing all accusations and replacing them with a brief statement. "We regret the misunderstanding. Any offense caused was unintentional, and we sincerely apologize for any distress. It was weak, pathetic really, But that wasn't what made Evelyn's heart flutter with uneasy anticipation. What came next was what had always lurked in the back of her mind, the call from Ryan. He had finally reached out. Evelyn sat on the edge of her bed, her phone in her hand, the voicemail blinking on the screen. She hesitated. There was a tightness in her chest, but she knew she needed to hear him out. She pressed play. "Mom, Ryan's voice was small, quiet, nothing like the strong, confident tone she was used to hearing. "I don't know how it got this far. I'm sorry. I should have. I should have done more to stop her. Please, can we talk? I'm sorry. I've messed up." Evelyn sat there for a long moment, her eyes fixed on the screen. It wasn't anger she felt. Not exactly. It was disappointment. Ryan's voice was filled with guilt, yes. But more than that, it was a reminder of everything that had led to this point, all the ways she'd been pushed aside, ignored, discounted by those she trusted most. With a sigh, she tapped the screen, deleting the voicemail before it could replay. No need to listen to it again. The apology was there, in its raw, unpolished form. But it wasn't enough. Not this time. Later that afternoon, a delivery arrived at Evelyn's doorstep. A simple bouquet of flowers sat on the front step, wrapped in plain brown paper. There was no grand gesture, no note except for a small card tucked inside, still sharp as ever. Evelyn smiled, the warmth of the gesture reaching her despite the weight of the last few days. Dr. Green had always been professional, always straightforward, but the simplicity of the flowers, a quiet acknowledgement of her strength, felt like the balm she needed. She placed the flowers on the kitchen counter and stood there for a moment, the weight of everything slowly sinking in. She had fought for her truth, and now there was peace in knowing that truth had been recognized by someone who truly understood her. But even as she breathed in the moment of calm, Evelyn knew Amber would come back for another round. The world had seen the truth, yes, but Amber was nothing if not persistent. Still, Evelyn wasn't worried. She had the upper hand, and she knew how to play this game. The phone buzzed again, and Evelyn looked down at the screen, expecting another message from Ryan. But it wasn't him. It was Claire. "We're ready for whatever comes next." Evelyn's hand tightened around the phone, a quiet resolve settling in. The game wasn't over. But this time she wasn't just playing. She was winning. The courtroom was heavy with anticipation. Evelyn sat at the plaintiff's table, her hands steady, her gaze unwavering as the legal battle finally came to its climactic moment. She had been through many battles in her life, but this one felt different. This wasn't about proving herself to others. It was about reclaiming her truth. Claire, calm as ever, had prepared everything meticulously. The opposing counsel tried to discredit Dr. Green's testimony, but he remained resolute. "There is no evidence of cognitive decline. Mrs. Moore is mentally sound." "Doctor," Green asserted, his voice clear and unwavering. Next, Evelyn took the stand, reading from the viral post she had made. "I am in perfect health, mentally and physically. I am sharp as ever." Her voice rang through the room, and she felt the power of her own words settle deep within her. This wasn't just a case of defamation. It was a battle for her dignity. The defense lawyer, desperate to divert attention, displayed Amber's apology post. It was a weak attempt at damage control, but the audience saw through it. The contradictions were clear. Amber's initial post, claiming Evelyn had dementia, followed by the thinly veiled guilt trip apology, spoke volumes about her intent. Evelyn sat tall, knowing the truth was now undeniable. As the judge delivered her verdict, the courtroom fell silent. "The defamation claim is dismissed," the judge announced. "The countersuit for emotional distress is granted. Miss Moore, your actions have caused harm, and this court holds you responsible for the damage." Evelyn's heart pounded in her chest, but there was no triumph in her expression. She had always known the truth. Now, so did the world. As the gavel fell, Evelyn turned to see Ryan, his face pale, his eyes filled with quiet shame. He had hoped to shield his wife, but now, the truth had settled between them, undeniable and unspoken. As they walked out of the courtroom, Claire spoke softly. "That was clean. Amber will have to reckon with this." Evelyn nodded. her thoughts on the long road ahead. She had won this round, but the war for her family was far from over. The phone rang incessantly the morning after the ruling. Evelyn hadn't expected the magnitude of the reaction, but the moment her story broke into the news cycle, it was everywhere. Local news outlets ran the footage from the courtroom, highlighting the judge's ruling with dramatic music beneath it. Grandmother versus daughter-in-law. The courtroom battle that exposed a lie, one headline read. It felt like the world was watching her now, and for the first time, she didn't mind. National outlets picked up the story too. TV networks replayed clips of her calm composure, juxtaposed with Amber's frantic attempts to twist the narrative. News anchors spoke about Evelyn's dignity, her strength in the face of public humiliation. The media frenzy felt surreal, but there was one detail that captured her attention more than anything else. The hashtag. Number Grandma Proved Them Wrong started trending on Twitter. First, slowly, then faster, until it was everywhere. It was as if the world had collectively decided to stand behind her. For 3 days, the hashtag lived at the top of social media feeds, echoing support from across the globe. People, many of them strangers, were rallying around her, praising her for taking a stand. But Amber? She wasn't faring well. Evelyn checked her social media quietly, feeling a tightness in her chest as she watched the numbers. Amber's followers plummeted. Companies who had previously sponsored her posts began pulling out, their contracts quietly dissolved. The once polished influencer brand was unraveling, and Evelyn couldn't help but notice the irony. Amber had built her entire persona on projecting an image of perfection, but it was her own actions that had undone it all. Hannah's social media had shifted too. Evelyn noticed that her granddaughter had switched her online name to Evelyn's last name. It wasn't a direct act of rebellion, but there was a certain solidarity in it. Evelyn's heart warmed as she saw her granddaughter silently stand with her. It wasn't about making a statement, it was about reclaiming her own narrative. The phone buzzed again. It was a text from Ryan. "Mom, we need to talk. I owe you an apology." Evelyn's hand tightened around the phone. She stared at the screen, the words hanging there between them. Part of her wanted to text back immediately, but she held back. It wasn't about just accepting the apology. She had to make sure it wasn't just words. He couldn't just apologize and expect things to go back to normal. Claire's words from earlier echoed in her mind. "Don't rush into anything. Take your time. This is your moment." Evelyn leaned back in her chair and took a deep breath. She hadn't wanted to make her family a battleground, but Amber had forced her hand. Ryan had chosen to ignore her, to believe his wife over his own mother. That choice had consequences, and now it was time for him to face those consequences. She typed a quick response. "We'll talk, but on my terms." She hit send and let the phone slip from her fingers, her eyes drifting back to the screen where the hashtag still dominated her feed. For the first time in a long while, Evelyn felt a strange peace settle in her chest. The fight wasn't over, not by a long shot, but for the first time, she was no longer fighting alone. As the day wore on and the media storm continued to rage, Evelyn knew the real battle was still ahead. Amber would try again, and Ryan would need to prove he truly understood what was at stake. But for now, Evelyn was standing tall, her truth no longer hidden behind the shadows of lies. And this time, she was ready for whatever came next. The air in the lawyer's office felt thick with tension as Evelyn sat across from Ryan. His back was slightly hunched, his hands clasped tightly in his lap. The usual warmth that once existed between them was now replaced with an awkward distance, the silence between them palpable. He had agreed to this meeting, had agreed to confront the truth, but the weight of it was clearly settling on him. Claire sat beside Evelyn, her presence a quiet anchor. She'd arranged this meeting with a singular purpose to make sure there were no more misunderstandings, no more excuses. Everything needed to be laid bare, boundaries established, and then they could start rebuilding or walk away entirely. Ryan was the first to speak, his voice barely above a whisper. "Mom, I knew about the post. I just didn't think it mattered." His eyes flicked to the side, avoiding Evelyn's steady gaze. "Amber was upset, and I thought it would blow over. It wasn't supposed to be like this. Evelyn's jaw tightened. She leaned forward slightly, her voice calm, but carrying the weight of years of quiet frustration. You let her humiliate me, Ryan. You let her do that to me just to keep peace, to avoid confrontation. Ryan's expression faltered, his hands gripping tighter. I didn't know what to do, he said, his voice shaking just a little. Amber's been struggling, and I didn't want to make things worse. I thought I could handle it. You didn't handle it, Evelyn replied, her tone even. You chose her over me. You chose to stay silent instead of protecting your mother. You allowed her to destroy my reputation without saying a word. Ryan's eyes closed for a moment, as if he were steeling himself against the truth. His shoulders slumped. I never meant for it to go this far, he whispered. Evelyn sat back in her chair, letting the silence stretch for a moment. Her heart ached, but she refused to let it show. She had already mourned this moment in her own way. What was left now was to move forward, to make sure that nothing like this could ever happen again. Claire shifted in her seat, her calm voice cutting through the stillness. Evelyn and Ryan, we need to establish clear boundaries. If you want to move forward, Ryan, these boundaries have to be respected. There can be no more bending, no more silence. Amber must understand this, and you must be firm in your position, not just for your sake, but for the sake of your family. Evelyn's eyes moved back to Ryan, studying him carefully. She had given him the benefit of the doubt for years, but now this was different. This wasn't about forgiveness. This was about protecting herself. And the terms of that protection had to be clear. I'm willing to move forward, Ryan, Evelyn said quietly, her voice firm. But only if you sign this agreement. It's a family mediation agreement, outlining what's acceptable and what's not. No more lies, no more public humiliation. If you're not willing to stand up for me, I can't stand by you. Ryan swallowed hard. He looked at the document in front of him, and for a moment, Evelyn thought he might hesitate. But then, without a word, he signed his name. The sound of the pen on paper felt final, like a door closing on a chapter that couldn't be rewritten. He pushed the paper toward Claire, his gaze still lowered. I'll stand by you, Mom. I promise. Evelyn nodded once, her expression unreadable. She didn't need promises anymore. She needed actions. She stood up slowly, taking the signed agreement from Claire. This is the last time, Ryan. There are no more chances after this. Ryan nodded, his face a mixture of relief and regret. Evelyn felt the weight of it all as she turned to leave, her heels clicking against the floor, sharp and deliberate. When she reached the door, she paused. She didn't look back. I'll let you know when I'm ready to talk, Evelyn said, her voice even. But that will be on my terms. And with that, she walked out of the room, the door closing softly behind her. It wasn't over. It never would be. But now, Evelyn was in control. By the time Evelyn got home from Claire's office, the sun was lowering into a soft Charleston evening, peach-colored light slipping through the magnolia leaves like it had nowhere urgent to be. She moved through her house the way she always had, quietly, with purpose. Keys on the hook, purse on the chair, a glass of water poured and left untouched. Control, she reminded herself. Wasn't loud. It was consistent. Still, the meeting with Ryan clung to her like humidity. His confession, I knew, I didn't think it mattered, played on a loop she couldn't turn off. Not because she wanted to punish him in her head, but because the words had landed like proof of something she'd been refusing to name for years, that her pain had been treated like an inconvenience. A knock came at the door, light and tentative, like whoever stood on the porch wasn't sure they deserved to be let in. Evelyn opened it to find Hannah, backpack hugged tight to her chest, hair pulled back in a hurried ponytail. She looked older than 14 in the way grief can fast-forward a child. Her eyes were steady, though, determined. Hi, Grandma, she said. Evelyn stepped aside immediately. Come in, sweetheart. Hannah walked in and paused in the living room, looking around as if taking inventory of the air. The house smelled faintly of lemon cleaner, and the bouquet doctor, green, had scent still sitting near the kitchen window, stubbornly alive. I wrote something, Hannah said. Evelyn's fingers tightened around the doorframe for a second. For school? Hannah nodded, then added, quickly, It was supposed to be about like a person you admire. But I changed it. I asked my teacher if I could. There was a tremor in her voice on that last part, the kind that comes from carrying something precious and fearing it might be rejected. Evelyn softened without meaning to. She walked to the couch, sat, and patted the cushion beside her. "All right," she said gently. "Let's hear it." Hannah pulled a folded paper from her bag. It had creases like she'd opened and closed it a dozen times, debating whether to bring it at all. She stood instead of sitting, like this was a presentation she needed to survive. Then she started reading. Her voice was small at first, but it steadied as she went. The essay wasn't dramatic. It didn't beg for sympathy. It was honest in the cleanest way about what happens when people assume age means weakness, when concern becomes a costume someone wears for attention. Hannah wrote about respect like it was a form of safety, about truth like it was something fragile that still mattered. Evelyn didn't move. She didn't interrupt. She watched Hannah's face as the words came out, watched her granddaughter grow braver sentence by sentence. When Hannah reached the end, her hands were shaking slightly. She lowered the paper and looked at Evelyn as if bracing for impact. Evelyn's eyes had filled without permission. She blinked slowly, not wanting tears to spill in a way that made Hannah feel responsible for them. "That was," Evelyn began, then stopped because her voice caught. Hannah swallowed. "I mean it," she said quickly, as if she needed to defend herself. "You taught me not to let people rewrite reality. You didn't yell. You didn't beg. You just proved what was true." Evelyn exhaled through the tightness in her throat, one hand lifting to cover her mouth for a moment. She nodded once, twice, because it was the only way to speak without breaking. "Come here," she said. Hannah crossed the room and Evelyn pulled her into a hug that was firm but careful, like she could protect her from the world by holding her correctly. Hannah's shoulders loosened, like she'd been carrying a weight she didn't know how to set down. When they finally separated, Evelyn reached for the paper. "May I keep this?" Hannah's eyes widened. "Really?" "Really," Evelyn said. "I'm going to print it." That night, after Hannah fell asleep on the couch for a few minutes, exhaustion-winning Evelyn sat at her desk and typed the essay into her computer with the same reverence she'd once reserved for student work that deserved to be remembered. She printed it on thick paper, the kind she used for special occasions, and slid it into a simple frame. She placed it beside the framed copy of Dr. Green's report, two documents that didn't match in purpose, but belonged together in meaning, proof, and legacy. The next afternoon, Claire stopped by with a file folder under her arm and the look of someone ready for battle until she saw the frames. She paused in the doorway of the study, her expression softening. "Well," Claire said, voice quieter than usual, "that's the best verdict yet." Evelyn didn't answer right away. She just stood there, the house feeling warmer than it had in weeks peaceful, not lonely. Then her phone buzzed on the desk. Notification, new post. Amber. Evelyn's gaze stayed on the framed essay as she reached for the phone, her thumb hovering over the screen like the next tap might change everything again. Amber's new post wasn't an apology. It was a link dressed up in soft colors and fake concern. Important conversation about elder health and family caregiving. Let's learn together. And she tagged me, like I was still part of her brand. Claire was in my study when the notification came through. She watched my face change as I read it. "She's trying to turn you into content again," Claire said. I set my phone down carefully, like it might bite. Then I'm done being her prop. That night, I didn't post. I didn't argue. I wrote an invitation instead. Quiet, direct, and mine. Elder truth. Dignity in the digital age. A small talk at the downtown library. No drama, no mudslinging. Just a room, a microphone, and the truth bigger than my family and too important to stay trapped inside it. The auditorium filled more than I expected. Seniors with folded hands. Adult children with guilty eyes. Hannah in the front row, sitting so straight she looked like she was holding me up with her spine. Claire stood near the aisle like a sentry. When I stepped to the podium, the applause startled me, gentle, respectful. I took a breath. "I'm not here because I enjoy attention," I began. "I'm here because attention was used as a weapon against me." The room quieted, and I felt the stillness settle into my bones. I talked about how easily people believe a story when it's wrapped in concern, how older women are treated like their minds are public property, how the internet turns private pain into entertainment and calls it community. Then I said the sentence that changed everything. Being older doesn't make you less credible, I told them. It makes you more practiced at surviving what people underestimate. Phones lifted. Not rude, almost reverent, like they needed proof they'd been there. At the end, Dr. Green stepped onto the stage. I hadn't asked him to make a speech, but he leaned into the microphone with a small, amused smile. "I can confirm," he said. "She's still sharper than my interns." Laughter warmed the room, and for the first time in weeks, my chest didn't feel tight. It felt open. By morning, clips of my talk were everywhere, not as scandal, as advocacy. People shared it with captions like, "Protect your elders," and "Truth doesn't expire." Donations started coming in after Claire added a simple link, $20, $50, $1,000. Notes attached. For my mom. For my granddad. For me. Claire called, sounding almost stunned. "Evelyn, this is becoming a real thing." So we gave it a name. The Elder Truth Initiative. Resources. Legal referrals. A place for people to document lies before they became legends. That evening, after a small community panel, I stepped outside for air. Across the parking lot, under a weak streetlight, someone stood half-hidden beside a car hood up, face turned away. Amber. Watching from a distance, realizing reputation isn't a post you delete. It's what remains. My phone buzzed. A private note from Ryan. "You proved what love with limits looks like." "Thank you," I replied once. Boundaries are not cruelty. When I looked up again, Amber was gone, but what I'd built wasn't. The first time someone suggested I write a memoir, I laughed so hard I startled myself. It was a quiet Tuesday afternoon, and I was at my kitchen table with my reading glasses sliding down my nose, sorting through printed emails people had sent the Elder Truth Initiative stories. Screenshots. Please. Claire had dropped off a folder the thickness of a phone book and said, casually, like she was asking me to pick up milk, "You know you could put this into a book." "A book about what?" I'd said, tapping the stack. "The internet being mean?" Claire didn't smile. "A book about the moment you refused to let them rewrite you." That was how it started. Not with ambition, with necessity. I wrote the way I used to grade essays, steadily, line by line, cutting fluff, leaving only what was true. I didn't name Amber. I didn't need to. The point wasn't revenge. The point was the mechanism how easily a lie spreads when it's wrapped in sympathy, how quickly a person can be turned into a story without consent. When the manuscript was finished, Claire insisted on the title, Memory Intact. I told her it sounded smug. She leaned across my desk and said, "It sounds unbreakable." Then somehow, quietly, it became real. A small publisher took it. A bigger distributor called 2 weeks later. An audiobook request followed. I still had moments where I'd look up from my computer and feel as if I'd stepped into someone else's life. But the most startling part wasn't the publishing whirlwind. It was the people. Seniors wrote to me like I was their cousin. Widows. Retired men. Women who'd been called confused when they disagreed with their adult children. Their messages didn't treat me like a celebrity. They treated me like proof. By the time Memory Intact hit shelves, it wasn't just selling, it was traveling. Book clubs, church groups, senior centers. A woman from Ohio posted a photo holding it on her porch with the caption, "Bought this for my daughter so she stops calling me forgetful when I say no." A week later, someone told me it had hit a bestseller list in a category I didn't know existed. Popular nonfiction for older adults. I reread that line 3 times, waiting for the joke. There wasn't one. Interviews followed radio first, then local television, then a morning segment where the host kept calling me a symbol of digital accountability. I wasn't sure how to carry that phrase. It felt too large for my shoulders. So I carried it the way I carried everything else, with posture and honesty. "I'm not a symbol," I told one interviewer. "I'm a person who got tired of being misrepresented." The day of the local bookstore signing, Charleston was bright and breezy, the kind of coastal afternoon that makes people linger. The bookstore had cleared a long table near the front window and stacked memory intact in neat towers like it belonged there. A little placard announced my name in tidy script. Evelyn Moore, author. I stood behind the table holding a pen that suddenly felt heavier than any gavel. My hands weren't shaking, not anymore. I'd stopped granting fear that kind of power. Hannah arrived first, wearing a simple sundress and the biggest smile I'd seen on her in months. She slipped behind the table and hugged me, careful not to wrinkle my blouse. "Look at all these," she whispered, nodding at the line forming near the door. "Grandma, they came for you." I leaned close and murmured, "They came for themselves, too. They just needed a reason." Claire walked in with Dr. Green right behind her. Claire looked like she did in court, clean lines, sharp eyes, ready for anything. Doctor. Green had swapped his white coat for a button-down shirt, but he still carried that same steady calm. He held out a small bouquet daisies this time and said, "I figured the book deserved flowers. And I figured you deserved less credit than you take," I said, smiling. He laughed. Still sharp. The signing began. People placed books in front of me with hands that trembled like mine had trembled weeks ago, but for different reasons. Some asked for signatures. Some asked for a minute. One woman, maybe in her late 60s, leaned in and said quietly, "My son tells people I'm slipping when I disagree with him." I thought I was alone. I put my pen down. I covered her hand gently with mine. "You're not," I told her. "And you're not imagining it." Her eyes watered. She nodded and walked away with her book held to her chest like armor. Hannah watched it all with a kind of pride that made me ache. Every time someone thanked me, she stood a little straighter, like my spine was hers too. After the last signature, the bookstore owner brought out a pitcher of lemonade and paper cups. We stood near the window as the sun lowered, warm light pooling over the stacks of books. Claire lifted her cup. "You turned humiliation into history," she said. Dr. Green clinked his cup against hers. "And into a public service." Hannah lifted hers too, grinning. "And into a bestseller." I shook my head, laughing an actual laugh, the kind that came from the belly instead of the throat. "And I still remember every word," I said. They laughed with me, and for a moment, it felt like the story had finally moved from survival to life. Then my phone buzzed in my pocket. A notification another post shared widely, tagged with my name. A familiar account. Amber. I didn't open it yet. I just let the vibration fade, staring out through the bookstore window at the street beyond, suddenly aware that some people don't stop trying to delete what they can't control. And I was done pretending I didn't see them. Amber's post, the one that pinged my phone at the bookstore, wasn't the explosion I'd braced for. It was a deletion. A quiet scrubbing of her timeline, like she could erase the months with a few taps and a swallowed pride. No explanation. No accountability, just absence. Claire saw my face when I finally opened it later that night, alone at my kitchen table with the daisies drooping slightly in their jar. "She thinks disappearing is the same as undoing," Claire said. I set my phone down and looked at the framed essay beside the framed report. "Some people confuse silence with innocence," I replied. 2 weeks later, an email arrived with a seal at the top I didn't recognize at first. The subject line made me laugh once. Short and startled, like my body hadn't been trained for surprise joy. Invitation. Ooh. S. House Committee Hearing Digital Privacy, Elder Protection. Claire read it twice, then handed it back to me like it might be fragile. "You don't have to," she said. "This is bigger than Amber. Bigger than your family." I stared at the words until they stopped looking like ink and started feeling like responsibility. "That's why I do," I said. Washington, D.C. was colder than Charleston, the kind of cold that sneaks under your clothes and sits against your bones. The morning of the hearing, my hotel mirror reflected a woman I barely recognized. Hair pinned neatly. Pearl earrings Hannah insisted were historic. Shoulders squared like a promise. In the car on the way to the Capitol, Hannah sat beside me in the back seat, her hands clasped around a small notebook. She'd been quiet all morning. Not sad-focused. "You nervous?" I asked. "A little," she admitted. then looked up at me. But not for you, I smiled. Smart girl. When we entered the building, everything felt designed to make you smaller marble, echoing hallways, guards who didn't smile. But something in me had changed. I wasn't walking into a room to beg for belief. I'd already survived the worst version of being misunderstood. This was simply telling the truth on a larger stage. The hearing room was bright, with overhead lights and serious faces. Representatives behind a long desk. Nameplates. Microphones. A quiet murmur that stopped when the chair announced my name. Mrs. Evelyn Moore. I stepped forward, adjusted the mic, and placed my notes on the table. I didn't need many. My story had been carved into me now. I looked out at the room and began, calm as I'd been on that first live stream, but steadier because I wasn't defending myself anymore. I'm 72 years old, I said, and I learned recently how easy it is to turn an elder into a headline. I spoke about the weaponization of concern, about families who use the language of illness to gain control, financial, emotional, social, about how quickly the public believes dementia when it's said with a trembling emoji and a sympathetic caption. Then I did what I always did in a classroom. I gave them something concrete. A lie spreads faster when it's vague, I said. So here's what a boundary looks like. Documentation, medical verification, consent. I explained the Elder Truth Initiative, how people had begun sending stories, how many of them weren't famous or viral, just trapped. I didn't mention Amber by name. I didn't need to. Her actions were a doorway. The room behind it was full. When questions came, I answered them the way I'd answered students who tried to corner me with half-truths patiently, precisely, never raising my voice. When one representative asked what I'd want lawmakers to understand most, I didn't hesitate. That dignity is preventative care, I said. And humiliation is not a harmless mistake. It is a form of harm. The room stayed still. I looked down once at Hannah in the front row, small in that big chamber. Eyes bright, chin lifted. Then I returned my gaze to the microphone and let my final sentence land exactly where it needed to. Truth needs no filter, I said. Only courage. For a beat, there was silence, like the room had to decide if it was allowed to feel something. Then applause rose up, not from everyone, but from enough. It filled the chamber and bounced off the marble until it sounded bigger than I was. When the hearing ended, reporters crowded the hallway like seagulls on the pier, microphones angled toward my face, questions overlapping. Mrs. Moore, do you think families exploit elders online more now than ever? Is this about your daughter-in-law? Are you pushing for new legislation? Claire stepped in with practiced grace, guiding me forward, answering what she could, shielding what didn't deserve air. I gave a few short responses. Clear, polite, finished. Outside, the light hit me like freedom. Not bright Charleston sun yet. DC light is colder, sharper, but it still felt like open air after a long room. Hannah reached for my hand as we walked down the steps. Her fingers were warm, steady. When we got back home a few days later, Charleston greeted me the way it always had, salt in the breeze, sunlight spilling onto familiar streets, the comfort of knowing where everything belongs. I stood in my driveway for a moment before going inside, letting the warmth settle on my shoulders. The house looked the same. The frames in my study waited quietly. The daisies had been replaced with something new. Hannah came up behind me and wrapped her arms around my waist, squeezing tight like she was holding on to something that mattered. You remembered everything that mattered, she whispered. I turned slightly and kissed the top of her head. I felt calm, not triumphant, not wounded, not braced for the next blow. Whole. For the first time since this began, I understood what freedom really was. Not winning, not proving, just living without flinching. And as I walked inside, I let the final truth settle in me. Simple and permanent. My daughter-in-law posted, "Grandma has dementia." So I went live with the medical report, and the truth stayed viral.